Yo, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the Lost Tangent Outpost. My name is Spada, and welcome back to another episode of the MultiVersus Living Roster. If you're new here, I hope you stick around to see what the show is about, and make sure to drop a like on the video if you enjoy it. So we've done it again. We filled what we're calling our launch roster prediction. All 28 character slots will be filled by the end of today's episode, and that means what's left is our 8 DLC slots. Now, just a reminder, this is not to suggest that there will only be 8 characters released post-launch. I suspect that number will be much higher over time anyways. It's just easier to handle this kind of speculation if we keep our scope limited. But that means we're now moving on to a whole new part of the MultiVersus Living Roster. Now we're talking about characters that the developer, or WB, would be releasing post-launch. It's in this part of the prediction where things get a lot more loose. While I wanted to be sure that the characters that we put in our launch prediction were pretty straightforward and made the most sense in terms of how easy they would be for player-first games to acquire them, in the case of characters released post-launch, I don't have this same level of concern. While I still think this part of the prediction needs to be viable and not entirely outlandish, this part of it I'm 100% fine covering characters from second and third-party sources. It's entirely possible that second and third-party characters could appear in the base roster. Tony and company have been saying for months that they want anything to be possible. However, there's nuance to this that I want to be sure we're considering before we get into today's discussion. For one, there is a reason the language is being chosen as "we want anything to be possible" and not "anything is possible." This is because it's not entirely up to them. While Tony has said Warner Brothers has not offered much opposition in terms of what characters they've chosen so far, that doesn't mean that character negotiations will always go this way. This means that while player-first games may want anything to be possible, there are still limitations that exist. It's also not just up to player-first games and Warner Brothers. It's up to the second or third party as well. In fact, not only is it also up to them, they're also really the gatekeepers. At that, characters could be approved, have work done on them, and then be removed from the game because of later disagreements between all the integral parties of the process. This is part of what caused issues with the development of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, where Disney agreed to allow Marvel characters into the roster, but then became insanely persnickety, famously preventing Capcom from being able to implement X-Men characters and instead forcing them to stick to characters that mostly already existed in the MCU. Even in the cases of characters that weren't in the MCU that ended up included in the roster, those characters had plans of being included in the MCU at some point or another. All of this is to say, I do think we stand a good chance of getting second and third party characters. I just think that they're most likely to be held back as characters to be released post-launch. But with that said, here's evidence that second and third party characters are completely viable. Alright, and so, second and third party characters. For the purposes of our conversation, I'm going to define second party as characters with ties to WB that aren't directly owned by them, and I'm going to define third party characters as characters with no direct connection whatsoever to Warner Brothers at all. Now, I could just pick random characters here, but I'm still going to try to organize everything as best as I can. So for today, we're discussing anime characters, and for the sake of trying to keep us with as simple a selection as is possible, we're also going to stick with second party characters for this conversation. That is, characters that have some amount of tangential connection to Warner Brothers. Let's get started by talking about an anime I have very little familiarity with, and that's One Piece. I actually have seen, I think, the first episode or two of One Piece, but that was years ago, and I've been too intimidated to try to get into it now. I mean, it's got like over 1,000 episodes. In either case, One Piece has that many episodes for a reason, and that reason is pretty obvious that it's pretty popular. The best way I can try to break down this show without having a ton of knowledge about it is that it's a show about a group of pirates, with the main character being a stretchy, straw hat wearing guy named Luffy. If I said the name incorrectly, I apologize, but I feel like it is Luffy. Luffy has that typical anime protagonist charm from what I can remember. And based on my limited knowledge, I think that Luffy does learn some pretty amazing abilities in relation to his ability to stretch his limbs and such. I think the popularity of this manga and anime are definitely reason enough to call for representation in this game. And if that happens, it does make the most sense in my mind to get Luffy to be the character representing the anime. Be sure to check the comments on this video too, because I'm certain that there are big fans of One Piece down below that could offer a much more comprehensive look as to what his abilities in MultiVersus might be. Next up, let's talk about Naruto. I've only recently gotten into this anime. My son and I have been watching through a few different shows and animes, and he really wanted to give Naruto a shot, so we started that about 6 or 7 months ago. We're currently about 160-ish episodes into Shippuden, and frankly, I love it. I'm actually pretty upset that I waited this long to watch the show. In either case, the entire show is filled with some awesome characters, so it seems weird to try to pick one, but I feel like you'd have to have the guy represent the show that the show itself is named after. So in that case, it's gotta be Naruto. And as such, I think it'd have to be the older version of him as well. While he's certainly fairly capable in the original anime, Shippuden is where he really starts to master his ninja abilities. So I think it makes the most sense to grab that version of the character. I think you could have shadow clones act as low health help, give him a kunai throw, and obviously there'd have to be some representation of the Rasengan and hopefully even his Rasen Shuriken. I imagine he'd operate between up close and far away, giving him a good hybrid mix of rushdown and some elements of zoning. So I think you'd have to put him in as a brawler. Also, bonus points if they're able to find a way to get the Ninetales cloak represented in a satisfying way. Dragon Ball Z is my first anime, if you don't count the original Pokemon cartoon from the 90s. I was actually introduced to Dragon Ball Z before then even, when I found it on Telemundo or something when I was like really young and they were airing a Spanish version of the show. So I didn't understand much about what was going on, but I loved that these spiky haired characters were throwing beams of light at each other. Either way, when it released on Toonami, I was hooked immediately. I love Dragon Ball. It's definitely one of my favorite franchises of all time. I think everyone has a different favorite Dragon Ball character, and I do as well, but I think Goku would have to be the character to represent the show. I think you could pretty easily include the super version of Goku and just give him different gis that represent different phases of his training and strength from the show. I like the idea of him having a transformation similar to that of what Shaggy has. And obviously with Ultra Instinct Shaggy being mostly based on Ultra Instinct Goku from Dragon Ball Super, I think it'd be great if there was some possible unique dialogue between them. I also think that because of that, you could give them a very similar power-up to each other and still keep them very different. We don't exactly know what benefits Shaggy gets from his power-up, but whatever it is, Goku's could just have a different attribute. He could even have different transformations that make slight alterations to his existing moves, but maybe at the cost of draining stamina. Even though this game doesn't have any stamina as we know it right now, maybe they could implement something like that for Goku. I don't know. But getting Goku into MultiVersus would be amazing, and I think his class could be a pretty wide range of things: brawler, mage, assassin, who knows. And with that, let's move on to our fourth option, Sailor Moon. I went back and forth with a couple of options to get into the slot, but I really think that Sailor Moon is just brimming with potential. Even if I haven't seen the anime since like 1996, it's a franchise that hasn't had a ton of love in the last several years, but is a truly classic anime. I think you could go with the character from the show that the show is named after, Sailor Moon. Her moveset could be a wide range of things, from her supersonic crying, a tiara throw, or any other number of attacks that are shown in the anime. I feel like she would need to be fighting from far away, so we'd have to make her a ranged mage character. She could even make use of the rest of the Sailor Moon team and have guest appearances from her cat and tuxedo mask. There's a lot of different ways to pay homage to the show while still adding functionality to the character. Lastly, one that I think most of us really want, JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. Now, this is one that actually stands a pretty decent likelihood of making it, since JoJo's is at least partially owned by WB Japan. So while ownership is seemingly shared, it seems within reason that WB could get access to this franchise. Now, there's a lot of JoJo's from the show, so it would be difficult to come up with a single representative, but if it were up to me, it would be Jotaro. He's the one with the most interesting flexibility as far as I'm aware for something like a fighting game. His stand gives him the ability to stop time, which I think would be a really interesting ability for a platform fighter. It's hard to say exactly how it would work, but in my head it would work something like Flash's signature ability from the Injustice series, where time is significantly slowed down for a set period of time, giving Flash access to a number of different interesting setups and combos. I think you could have something very similar with Jotaro, but as I've said in other videos, I still have a long way to go to catch up on this anime, so I know there are characters like Josuke, Jolene, and Giorno that could also be good options. I just don't know much about them, and I'm not willing to spoil those seasons for myself for the sake of just this YouTube show. But if you guys think one of the other JoJo's is a better option, just let me know down in the comments. If it is Jotaro that steps in as a rep, I think he'd have to play as a brawler or mage ranged. It just depends on how they decide they want to implement the stand. Now, I know all these shows actually do or have aired on Cartoon Network's Toonami. I think that Naruto Shippuden and JoJo's are currently airing on Adult Swim, and Dragon Ball Super did air on that version of Toonami as well. So this is what makes it so much easier for them to be used than maybe some other anime that aren't being aired or haven't been aired on anything related to WB. So with that, let's go ahead and discuss last episode's results. Last episode, we talked about Looney Tunes characters. I provided you all with 5 options of characters from the Looney Tunes franchise, and these are the results. I really wasn't sure what to expect from this one. I knew that Daffy was the one I've been wanting most, but I figured there'd be some sleeper hits in here. But I am clearly not alone, given that Daffy won this poll in a landslide. So with that, let's go ahead and get Daffy into the living roster. And all that leaves for us to do is to get the poll represented for this episode. So based on everything we discussed today, which anime do you think would be most likely to show up in MultiVersus MultiVersus post-launch: One Piece, Naruto, Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, or JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. To vote in this poll, you can go to one of two places. The first place is located on this channel's community page. If you go there, you'll see this poll at the very top. While you're there, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you can see when the next episode goes live. Alternatively, if you'd like, you can go to the custom poll I've set up on a website called Straw Poll. The link to this poll is in the description and pinned to the top of the comment section of this video. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, make sure to like the video. It just simply helps us get more visibility. And like I said before, make sure you're subscribed so you can participate in this ever-evolving prediction that we call the Living Roster. I've also set up a Discord server for this community, so if you'd like to join, check the description for the link there. Thank you everyone for coming by, and until next time, later.